Hello, angels. Welcome to the hashtag 2023 is over party, or at least the beginning of it, where I start a content blitz throughout this entire month that will keep me from many social affairs that I would otherwise like to attend. The reason for that is that we're celebrating the end of the year in music, which I will be doing through a series of videos, as well as a number of written posts in various blogs and magazines and websites and the like. And the very first thing, the beginning of the 2023 is over party, is this video. Last year, I was completely stunned by just how many great albums from brand new artists were really knocking my socks off. So I decided to make a video recounting some of the best debut albums of 2022. And we're doing it again this year, which I will say for a second time, just like I did last year, this is a stupid idea and it will age poorly. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, even further into the future, the albums that are considered the best debuts of 2023, probably nobody has even heard yet. They're from bands who won't break out for years to come. So in a sense, I know that what I'm doing isn't exactly future-proof. Arguably, it's the opposite. So take it for what it is. As far as the debut albums that we are massively made aware of as a public music listening conscious, these are my favorites. Another thing to keep in mind, so I'll stop fucking talking and we can get on with the list, is that I do not think these 10 albums are nearly as good as the 10 albums that I picked last year. There wasn't a stiff competition, there are no honorable mentions on this list, and frankly, the high points don't even really seem to reach as high as they did last year, but I thought it would be good to shout out some of these artists and to put my opinions out there on their debut music, because they're going to continue making music in the future, and it's worth stating now while I can. Good, explanation part done. Now it's time for at least half of you watching to turn off the video immediately when I tell you that number 10 on my list, Sexy Red, with her debut album Hood Hottest Princess.
If you see me and you tryna see what's up, he wanna fuck with me, then I'ma have him stuck.
St. Louis rapper Sexy Red experienced a massive breakthrough this year, starting with the Nicki Minaj featuring Pound Town 2, a banger of a single, hits like Ski, Hellcats SRTs, her appearance on Drake's new album For All the Dogs. If not for Ice Spice, you could argue that in rap music it had kind of been the year of Sexy Red. And her debut album did not exactly win me over when I heard it earlier this year. I liked some of the songs from it, and it's so obvious how clear of a knack she has for great hooks, even when some of the lyrical detail beyond that, though raunchy and occasionally very engaging, is still somewhat shallow. But wow, has she improved quickly, especially with the recent deluxe edition of this album, which doubles its track list. And wow, the new songs that she adds to it are all so good. I'm not exactly sure where to parse the fact that I'm kind of including a de facto deluxe album in this list. This was never going to top the list or anything. I don't think the album is that good, but I do like it, and I couldn't in good conscience talk about the best debuts of 2023 without mentioning the pretty substantial achievement that Sexy Red netted with Hood Hottest Princess. At number 9, another artist whose curiosities may sometimes outpace their actual music, Panther, who released their debut album, Failed at Maths. I originally covered Panther in my Internet Core video years ago and told their really interesting story of formulating as a band in the late 90s, cutting some early demos, and then completely disappearing without really ever making a wave to the public eye. But then their music re-emerged via a rotted CD that was uploaded, versions of the songs from their death metal EP online, which became kind of a lost media cult classic. And I loved these projects. I loved their rotted versions. I loved following the story of the members of Panther being found 20 years later, and I can almost not even describe the sensation of hearing the songs in their original non-rotten version for the first time. All of that is to say that their new album, their debut album 20 years later, is okay. It's far less mysterious, far less reserved. It sees the band grabbing hold of some much more pop instincts and pop influence in their songwriting. The electronics here are far from subtle when they are deployed, and the track list is a little bit on the inconsistent side, but it's more nitpicks than complaints here. Mostly, I just think they have a really cool story that supplements a half-decent record that was plenty good enough to get me paying attention to whatever Panchico does next. At number 8, we have Poet, Aja Monae, with her debut album, When the Poems Do What the Poems Do.
My love survived the middle passage, waded the waters. My love be grassroots, organizes movements.
So this is the debut album from Monae, who is primarily known as a poet, or certainly has been a poet a lot longer than she has been a sort of musical artist, and she's translating that into music through this rich jazz-influenced spoken word project. While Aja is the main character and primary artist on this album, she isn't afraid to sometimes hand the mic off to other instrumentalists or even other as unique vocalists, which makes this thing feel like a living, breathing group project of sorts. It's a long listen and one that occasionally has some challenging sonic moments, but for the most part, I really appreciate what she brings to it as a writer. The poetry that she is performing here is fascinating meditations on the Black experience, on the American experience. It is pure racial consciousness, and it won't surprise you to learn that the reason I was even turned on to this album in the first place was from No Name. If you're the type of person who likes indulgent jazz and spoken word music that is on the richer and livelier side of things, I definitely recommend this because she's a really unique artist with a dynamic perspective and a lot to say. At number 7, we've got Post American, the debut album from Mississippi punk outfit MS Paint.
Just a passerby in the midst of the storm, straight those you say.
I was lucky enough to get the chance to see this band perform live this year. Shout out Clearbody, and that really made their music start to click with me in a way that some of my preliminary listens to stuff I had heard from them hadn't really. And then finally hearing this album was like such a breath of fresh air. This is a very creative and versatile record. I sort of describe this band very broadly as being underneath the punk umbrella. Some have used the term post-hardcore, though I think that's a little bit less accurate, but the band is difficult to describe. That's sort of the point. They are bringing together a lot of different influences, a lot of different styles, and while I can't wait to see what they definitively settle on as their particular brand, I do really think that there's a lot of value in listening to this record and it kind of being fucking all over the place. It's a cognitive dissonance that seems in line with not just what they're saying, but the way they are saying and performing it. And the results are pretty compelling. I like this record a lot. And at number 6, Pink Pantheress comes through with her debut album, Heaven Knows.
On a Monday, can I see you? Can I check my numbers? 'Cause I want to. I know it's annoying how much I do.
Now, I did get a little bit of flack for some people for not being crazy about Pink Pantheress's previous project, which was full of songs that had a great 10-second TikTok snippet, but rarely were fleshed out into something meaningful or impactful in any way. And the thing with Heaven Knows is that it is still resistant to overthinking. Those short, irresistible little snippets of song are still here, but I think Pink Pantheress has gotten so much better at fleshing them out into full songs that actually make sense. This album is not robust, it is not conceptual. It is not any of the big galaxy brain things that make music journalists and critics feel very smart for liking music. It is objectively quite simple, and yet it is just very infectious. Pink Pantheress knows exactly what she's doing, serving up one catchy, simple, digestible, but sticky song after another. I am looking forward to see her progress artistically as her career continues, but while we're still in the Queen of TikTok snippets era of Pink Pantheress, I think this is about as good as we're going to get, and I find myself enjoying this record more and more with pretty much every listen. At number 5, the extremely long-awaited proper debut studio album from Yayi, With a Hammer.
I don't even know. Am I saying thank you? Am I enjoying it too? Am I taking it for granted?
Yayi has been around for years at this point, releasing EPs and short mixtapes of her very distinctive style, which is this very girlish take on house music and dance music that also features some pop and occasionally even some hip-hop influences. Her song Rain Girl is so goddamn iconic that I don't even know how you can have a pregame playlist without including it, and her pretty viral cover of Drake's Passion Fruit is right there behind it. Plus, this album led off with genuinely one of my favorite songs of the entire year, the track For Granted, which is just this perfect combination of brilliantly catchy little refrains and hard-hitting instrumentation. And while I wish that she was hitting on that more across this album, I have grown to appreciate what she does deliver. I criticized this record a good bit when I reviewed it for various things that I didn't like about it, and while I still think it is inconsistent, which is particularly harmful given its length, I'm starting to appreciate more and more about it that I didn't see in the first time, particularly from the electronic elements. One of the things that I said about the record was I was surprised that it felt like Yayi settling for the very first time in her career from an instrumental and in particularly from an beat and electronic dance oriented focus, but the more that I listened to these songs, the more it felt like she was just choosing to instead hone in on some of the more nuanced elements of that songwriting and presentation. And that's when more and more of the record began to click with me. I like some of the shorter tracks. I like some of the more instrumental focused tracks more than I did originally when I reviewed this thing earlier this year. And I kind of expect to continue listening to it as Yayi's career goes forward. It is certainly maybe not the best moment she's had so far, but as a debut album, I think it presents her artistry in a way that is favorable and accessible. Speaking of accessible, at number 4, another long-awaited debut, Reay finally delivers with My 21st Century Blues.
Card games and heart games, I said let's play, I should know better. My boy ain't my boy, but I call him that cause it feels better.
I feel like we've all been hearing about Reay for so long as this young, versatile, creative talent, but she has been caught up in label limbo and finally escaped it late last year. And the resulting album that she dropped impressed a lot of people right out of the gate, myself included. Now, do I think it's a little on the bulkier side? Are there some tracks that I would cut? Sure, but both throughout this track list and even within individual tracks, Reay is showing off a versatility that not a lot of artists are capable of. In particular, the way that she displays intimacy and vulnerability on this record comes in a lot of different packages. She can do it while admittedly sounding pretty hard on a banger, but she can also strip it back and get into her most poised and subtle presentation as a vocalist and do a really, really good job at both. Take a track like The Thrill Is Gone, for example, and you can see both of those extremes on display within the same track. Same thing kind of goes for the album's breakthrough hit, Escapism, with 070 Shake. I don't think there's anything on this album that will flatly blow you away if you haven't heard it yet. It's just pretty consistently well-polished, produced pop and R&B music with a very impressive talent at its core who has a lot of room to grow but shows a ton of promise on this record. So now we're getting into the debuts that I like a lot. The ones that knocked my socks off on first listen and held up as I continued to listen to them throughout the year. Starting with one of the best, most interesting, most grounded, and most intense pieces of hardcore I heard anywhere this year. And that's on the new Gel album, Only Constant. This is not typically the kind of hardcore music that really gets me going. I love to see this genre expanded upon, pushed into the realm of post-hardcore, and influenced by other genres and styles you wouldn't expect. And for the most part, Gel are playing it pretty straight, but god damn, do they do it so ferociously. And though they're not really stepping outside of the box stylistically, they are delivering pummeling intensity in both the performances and the writing and the compositions here. You can barely find a moment to breathe on this record, and even when you do, it is still presented in this march of eerie and unsettling sonic intensity. This band feels like it's been generating hype for ages, and honestly, with this debut album, it's easy to see why. They lived up to expectations. I'm assuming if you like any hardcore music, you've already heard this, but if it somehow slipped by you, or you want to try out one of the better hardcore records I heard anywhere this year, do yourself a favor and give it a shot. At number 2, we have Cara Jackson with Why Does the Earth Give Us People to Love?
Love is no currency.
This is the second time on the list we've got someone who is predominantly known as a poet dipping their toes into music for the first time and doing so quite impressively. But where Aja Monae takes her very politically righteous music to a style of jazz that feels very familiar and very fitting for it, Cara does it similarly with her emotionally earnest, vulnerable, raw, and sometimes painfully, sometimes hilariously real songwriting to a challenging world of folk music. When I say this is a folk album, I do not mean this shit is TikTok indie folk. She is serious about making a record that is challenging, and challenging is exactly what she delivers. While the sonic demeanor of this album does appropriately vary based on the subject matter of the music at hand, some of the most serious topics covered on this record get appropriately difficult instrumental challenges to accompany them. And this record just sounded better and better to me every time. Even songs that I thought were either garish or challenging in the wrong way at first started to grow on me when I broke down exactly what Jackson was saying and why it was coming through the way that it was instrumentally. There's just a poise to this album that feels like the presence of a veteran singer-songwriter, and for Cara to be doing it so early in her career, it just makes me excited for what she's capable of, because this is already a fantastic way to start her divulgence into music off. And as she continues to learn and develop experiences as a person that will be translated into her very raw and vulnerable music, I imagine that the compositions will go to even more sonically fascinating and ambitious places, and that's something to look forward to. So there was never really any question as to what was going to be number 1 on this list. Just like Chat Pile last year, I heard one particular debut album this year that really just blew me away, and if you can't tell from my very positive review of the record, the many times I publicly recommended it to friends and followers, and the shirt that I am currently wearing, that album is the Model Actress record, Dog's Body. Holy shit, this album rips. Oh my god, it is such a unique piece of industrial rock that is so visceral and so erotic in ways that this genre can often be so averse to. This record really does feel like it is getting at some of the roots of the industrial music, by which I mean this shit is horny. And it's not even explicitly horny and like a kink or like fetish themed music, since it is just darkly erotic, visceral, and intimate in a way that nothing else I heard this year was. And they pull that off through the absolutely lethal focus of the pseudo spoken word sung vocals all over this record, and the constant rushes of shrill, harsh noise that work their way in and out of these compositions. Almost every song on here has a moment that is strikingly quiet and intimate, only for it eventually to end up somewhere so blisteringly loud and chaotically versatile that your head will spin wondering just how you got there. It is a spectacular sensation, and one that I loved right away, but also grew on me more and more and more. It doesn't help that I saw the band twice, and they were incredible live both times. And that is that, ladies and gentlemen. Boys and dolls, it is not a perfect list, but there's plenty on there that is worth diving into, and I will recommend Model Actress to absolutely everybody, because if there's one thing that I've been surprised by this year, it is people that don't really care that much for any other industrial music or post-punk or experimental rock in general, finding this band and falling in love with them. Model Actress is for the people. God damn it. And the next time you see me, I think I'm going to be talking about my worst and best hit songs of the year, hopefully later this month, hopefully before the year ends. That's not a promise, but it's a hope, and another hope is I hope you stick around and watch it. That's it. Mwah.